Hey everybody, we're starting a new chapter here. We finished Proverbs Chapter 17, so we're going to start Chapter 18. It says, "Through desire a man having separated himself, seeketh and intermeddleth with all wisdom." So this is a verse, I've actually had some disputes with some brothers about the meaning of this. Some people take this as a negative, that because of the word intermeddleth, like the word intermeddle kind of has a negative connotation. So they're saying like it's not wise to separate yourself. And in most cases that's true, because godly counsel is like necessary. You need to have the counsel of the saints, because a lot of times we're blinded by our own hearts, we're blinded by our own desires, and it gets really, really hard to discern what the righteous thing to do, what the will of the Lord is, because our own desires, our own deceitful heart is clouding our vision. And I've experienced that. I've had times where I've thought that I've had clear insight on what the godly and righteous thing to do, what the thing the Lord wanted me to do is, and it's been wrong, and it's gone against the counsel of my fellowship, against the wisdom of my counselors, the people that I surround myself with, those that are born again. So it's often not wise to separate yourself, and so that's how they read this, that a person who separates himself is intermeddling with wisdom. They see that as negative. I've always read this a little bit different. I've always read this that it's a time of contemplation, like a time to sit back and really think. You're looking for wisdom, because a lot of times there's just too much commotion, too much interference with your thought process, and so you need to separate yourself to get quiet, to get calm, and to think things through, to seek wisdom, like what is the wise and righteous and holy thing to do in this situation, to quiet your heart, to ponder on the scriptures, to think it through. And then of course, if it's not, like, sometimes you have clear biblical references that tell you what to do, and so you know the path of righteousness and you know to walk in it. Other times there's like these gray areas where we don't really have clear instruction. Like let's say you're looking at getting a new job or something. You don't have, the scriptures don't specifically tell you do this or do that, or don't take this job or take that job. So it can be hard to discern what the right thing to do is. And so you sit and you think it through. And then a lot of times if you desire a certain thing, you can think you have clarity on that, but it's really your emotions, it's really your heart. And so then you want to get the wisdom of your counselors. You want to seek the advice of those around you, see what their perspective is, see if they can see things a little bit more clearly. And in the times when I've done that, when I've gone against wise counsel, all my counselors were telling me the same thing, but I was persuaded that the will of the Lord was this. I thought, I've got clarity. I know what the Lord wants me to do in this situation. And everybody around me is going, no, that's not the right thing to do. And I'm like, well, you guys, I justified my actions because my heart had deceived me. My heart had told me that I was walking in the ways of the Lord. And I thought it was the voice of the Lord directing me, but it was really just my heart. It was my own desires, my own deceptive heart. So I should have listened to my counselors. So basically what I'm getting at here is, with this first verse, I can see it both ways, that there can be a negative, separating yourself and not heeding the counsel of others, just, thinking your own thoughts, pursuing your own desires. But I also see wisdom in stepping back from the commotion of life and getting silent before the Lord and thinking things through. And then also getting the counsel when there's not clear biblical instructions. Yeah, so I mean, you could take that hand in hand. There's that verse that says, "Don't forsake the fellowship." So you definitely don't want to separate yourself for a lengthy period of time. This wouldn't be talking about stepping away from your fellowship, because that's life, and just to think things through to get I lost the internet there for a second, so I'm not really sure where it left off. We'll just pick up in verse 2 here. It says, "A fool hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself." And so the fact that that verse follows the first one, I can see why people might read the first one with that negative connotation, because the context here, if this verse ties in, and normally you would read like, okay, it's continuing a thought, but Proverbs are a little bit different. Proverbs are usually just single pieces of wisdom. So like there's no flow of thought. There's no contextual verse following upon verse. It's usually just individual pieces of wisdom. Like me saying, always turn your headlights on when you're driving and it's raining. Obey the speed, or I'm trying to think of something. Let's say you're giving your kid advice, and just general advice in life, and you tell them, make sure you turn your lights on when you're driving and it's raining. Make sure you always balance your checkbook, your financial ledger every week. Exercise and make sure that you're eating fruits and vegetables. Floss your teeth. Just bits and pieces of information that really don't have a tie-in to each other. Other than that, their wisdom advice. And so that's how the Proverbs are often written. It's a horrible analogy, I know, I apologize, but it was just spur of the moment there. But so the Proverbs are usually written that way, and like you get a single line of advice, and then a separate single line of advice, with no connection between the two, other than that it's godly wisdom. So it's just wisdom. You can take each individual verse and pull wisdom out of it, separate from the other verses. So there's usually not a contextual flow of thought. Sometimes they do. Sometimes you get a 3 or 4 verse section where it ties into each other. It's the same thought. Sometimes there's an overall theme, like the proverb, 8? Proverb with the whorish woman, or something like that, or Proverbs 31 with the advice for kings, or the godly woman takes up a big section of Proverbs 31. So that's not always the case. So I don't know if 2 ties in, if this is second. I say all that so that I can say I don't know if verse 2 ties in with verse 1, or if it's just a separate individual piece of information. So if somebody were to make the argument that verse 1 is a negative thing, it's if they're saying verse 1 is saying it's foolish to separate yourself and intermeddleth with wisdom, to stir up, they're saying it's if you separate yourself, you're not really seeking wisdom, you're seeking your own heart, because and then they use verse 2 to kind of prove that, because it says, "A fool hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself." And that's saying that a fool doesn't really want to learn anything. A fool doesn't want to gain knowledge or understanding or wisdom. A fool just wants to justify himself. A fool just wants to prove his own point, just wants to make his own case. And people speak that way. Like you can hear that, like when you're in a conversation with somebody, people just speak their own mind and close all thought to other information, to outside information. They've determined something, and they're just trying to argue their point. They're trying to build up their point and prove it to you without hearing any kind of other information. They've already decided. And so that's what a fool does. A fool's not trying to learn. A fool's not trying to glean wisdom to see, what is true. A fool has already determined what's true and is just trying to speak that. So a person could tie 2 into 1 and say, see, that's why 1 is negative, because if you separate yourself, you're not really seeking wisdom. You're trying to discover your own heart. You're just trying to justify your own point. And that very well could be true. Like I say, though, I've always read those as 2 separate pieces of information. And I've read verse 1 as saying that it's a good thing to step back from the commotion of life and to think things through. to step away from the noise of life and to say, I've got a situation here in front of me. Let me think this through. What's the wise thing to do? So I'm not reading intermeddleth as a negative word. Intermeddle just means to dig into, to search. Yes, in most cases it's used in a negative sense, but I don't think it necessarily has to be. And then verse 2 would be a separate issue, saying that the foolish person doesn't want to gain any understanding. They just want to prove their own point. Verse 3, when the wicked cometh, then cometh also contempt, and with ignominy reproach. The words of a man's mouth are as deep waters, and the wellspring of wisdom as a flowing brook. So that's always kind of perplexed me as well. What does it mean when the scriptures say the words of a man's mouth are deep waters? I think there's another place where it says like the wisdom of man is like deep waters, or the counsel of man is like deep water, something like that, and wisdom will draw it out. And I thought, well, what does that mean? The words of a man's mouth are as deep waters, and a wellspring of wisdom as a flowing brook. The deep waters part, I'm not really sure. Words of a man's mouth. So what we speak is like deep waters. What are deep waters like? I don't know. I don't have insight on that. And the wellspring of wisdom as a flowing brook. Wisdom flows. So out of the righteous, out of a born-again person who's filled with the Word of God, because what's in your heart is going to flow out of your mouth. So if you're filled with wisdom, which comes from the Word of God, then wisdom is going to flow out of you. I think that's that second part. I don't know what that first part means. I don't know what the deep waters are. That other scripture about drawing the counsel of man out. I've often thought like it's hard to get people to open up, and so you have to be wise to draw that out of them. But I don't know what this one is. The words of a man's mouth are as deep waters. I don't know if you got any insights on that. Maybe you can comment and help me understand that better. But verse 5, we'll do this one more, I think, and then we'll wrap it up. It is not good to accept the person of the wicked, to overthrow the righteous in judgment. So that's just about being fair in judgment, to be just. It's an unjust system that favors the wicked, that overthrows the righteous. Unfortunately, we see a lot of that in our society. Our government is very corrupt. Our courts are very corrupt. And so we see the wicked benefit from that, and the righteous not get justice. It's one of the most frustrating things for me, honestly, especially lately with the political atmosphere, is I read the news or I listen to podcasts, and I get so extremely frustrated with the injustice. Like, there's so much wickedness in our society, and especially with like the liberal left. They're so wicked, and it's so blatant and so obvious, and there's so much lying that occurs. But because they have such a firm grip of academia and the media and the entertainment, they're shielded. Their lies are promoted, and because they have such a grip on the political system, this unjust political system and the unjust courts, there's often no consequences for their lies. There's no consequences for their slander. There's no consequences for their immoral behavior or their sedition and treason. There's no consequence. Nobody is arrested. Nobody's prosecuted. Nobody's punished. And so you see this, and then you see multitudes just going along with it because the media has people so brainwashed. The propaganda has people just blinded, that it just overwhelmingly frustrates. It's like they're like to the point where you're like either so angry that it's causing love to grow cold in you, or you're just overwhelmed with desperation to the point of tears, like, Lord, do justice, do righteousness. So the fact that, like, it says it's not good to accept the person of wicked, to overthrow the righteous in judgment, it is not good. It is so grievous to see injustice, to see wickedness prosper. It causes grief, it causes sorrow, it causes I can't even explain. It's one of the worst things I've ever experienced. It's heart-wrenching. It pierces, it tears your heart apart. It's like, Lord, please do justice, bring these wicked to justice. And we know that ultimately they will on the day of judgment. The Lord is slow to wrath, but there is wrath coming. And ultimately we want people to be spared of that. We want people to be saved. So you have to balance this with it. It's hard when you're looking in the face of it all the time. So like I've wrestled with that too. Then is it wise to even pay attention to what's going on politically? Is it wise to listen to the news when it causes this heartache and frustration? Would it be better to be ignorant of it, to just live a life completely separated from that? And because we are pilgrims, we are strangers, we are aliens, we live, we're not of this world. So why concern ourselves with this world? Let the dead do what the dead do. And so there's this like wrestling out with me. It's like, yes, that's true. We should be living for the kingdom. Let the world do what the world wants to do, and have pay no attention to it. But then there's this other part, and like, I don't know, maybe that's the wrong part, that it wants to. Yeah, that feels fleshly to want to look into those things, to be aware. And I justify it by saying, well, we're supposed to expose the unfruitful works of darkness, so I need to know what the darkness is doing to expose it. But then there's that other verse that says we're supposed to be simple concerning evil things, So that's something I'm wrestling through in my heart. But it's verse 5 just reminds me of the injustice of society, and it's not good. It's grievous to see. But anyways, we'll wrap up there. Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 6 next time. All right, I love you guys. Talk to you later. Hey, everyone. We're continuing on in Proverbs Chapter 18. We read through verse 5, so we're going to pick up here in verse 6. A fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for strokes. Just showing that how foolish it is to call for violence, to be quick to violence. A fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. It's that we've read quite a bit about language in the scriptures here, just because it's an evidence of what's in the heart. And so the whatever's in your heart is going to show in your idle talk, your casual language. And if sin is in your heart, that's going to reveal itself in your language, which is going to lead you to destruction, because the wages of sin is death. And so this is just saying, like, and a lot of verses like this, just it's the words, it's what people speak. And again, it's not the language of a careful person. And what I mean by that is that it's not a person who's putting on a show. Like we can all clean up the outside of the cup, so to speak. We can all put on a good show when we're in a professional office setting, or when we're going to church, or when we're around our grandparents or whatever. But what's your common relaxed language? How do you speak when you're in a relaxed environment, without thinking things through, but just what naturally flows out of you? What do you speak in that natural, unprotected environment where you're not guarding your mouth, where you're not guarding your thoughts, you're just speaking what's on your heart? That's the evidence of what's in a heart, because what's in the heart is going to come out. And so that's the evidence of whether or not a person's born again, or a person's lost, or in this case, a person is foolish. A foolish person is going to speak snares, things that trap them, like getting caught in a lie or something, or violent things that are going to lead to destruction. Verse 8, the words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. I suppose that just makes me think of that old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And like the opposite is true. We recover pretty quickly from violent strokes. Somebody hits you, you get a bruise, and you recover from that pretty quick. But when a person says something mean, when a person talebearer makes up tales about you, or slanders you, or whatever the case may be, it's like a wound that goes down in the innermost parts of the belly. It slices, it sticks with you, it hurts, it damages you. It's cutting, it's piercing. It's another reason, you just want to be really careful how you speak to people. Verse 9, he also that is slothful in his work is brother to him that is a great waster. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it and is safe. The name of the Lord is our strong tower. And why? So a strong tower makes you think of like a castle and an enemy attacking the gates. You're in that strong brick fortified tower that can't be penetrated. You're safe in there. And so the name of the Lord is our strong tower. It's where we run into. Why the name of the Lord? You think because in his name we have faith in his name. We trust he is our king, he's our God, he's our protector, he's our provider, he's our shield. We trust in his sovereign hand, we trust in his power. So we run into his name, we rely upon him. We put all of our faith into him. We put our circumstances, our hopes into him, knowing that he's in control, that he is God, that this world belongs to him, that he will do as he pleases. And we trust his character, that he loves us, and that he's says he's going to do what's best for us in the spiritual, eternal sense. He works all things together for good to those who love him and are the called according to his purposes. So we trust in that. We rely, we say, Lord, whatever it is you have designed for us, we trust you. Knowing that that could even be a Job situation. He might take everything from us, but he has wise and holy and good purposes behind that. And so we trust him. We rest in him. We run into that strong tower and relax. And no matter what kind of attacks are coming, we trust in him. And then verse 11 here is the counterpart. It says, the rich man's wealth is his strong city, and as an high wall in his own conceit. So while we have the Lord as our safety net, we have the Lord as our strength. The rich man, which in this case would imply like a lost man as well, because he's depending not on God, he's depending on his wealth. He trusts that his money, that his possessions, his gatherings is going to save him. He thinks when hardships come, I can secure myself through riches. I can build. I can. Well, I've often heard it said like when Wall Street collapses, like when there's financial dips in the stock market or in Wall Street, that's when suicides go up, because you have there men who had put their trust in their riches, and when those riches vanish, when those riches go away, they've lost their hope. They've lost their strong tower. Think about like Job again. If Job had trusted in his possessions, then when his possessions were taken, he would have been lost. So a rich man and a high wall in his own conceit. So his pride, thinking, I can survive anything. I can get through this. I've built up for myself a big bank account. I've got a big house. I've got good insurance. I've got whatever the case. They're trusting in their own conceit, their own pride, their own wealth, their own possessions and strength, and that's fleeting. It goes away. It can be conquered. It can be destroyed. It's sinking sand. Riches can go away like that. There can be a financial collapse. The bank where you have all your money could go bankrupt, and all your money's gone. You got nothing. You can lose your job and lose your savings pretty quickly. So to trust in that is foolish. It's a mirage. It's not a strong tower. It's a very weak tower. It's a cloth tower. It's not going to defend against any attack. But the Lord is the strong tower. So I think we'll stop there. That was verse 11. Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 12 next time. All right, I love you guys. Talk to you later. Hey everyone. We're continuing on in Proverbs Chapter 18. We read through verse 11, so we're going to pick up in verse 12. It says, "Before destruction the heart of man is haughty, and before honor is humility." Again, another repetitive theme, which is quite common here in the Proverbs. We get these repeats of the same type of issue dealt with on several different instances. And I've heard it said, and it makes sense, like when the Lord says something twice or even 3 times, there's added emphasis on it. So when we see these repetitive themes throughout the Proverbs, we ought to pay close attention to them. Not that we don't pay close attention to every bit of wisdom, but there's just an added emphasis on these repetitive themes. And in this one, it's talking about pride. Pride comes before the fall. And this one says before destruction, the heart of man is haughty. So when there's pride, when there's ego, when there's arrogance in the heart, you can rest assured that destruction is around the corner. Because the Lord is going to humble you. The Lord's not going to, if you're his child, the scriptures say that he chastises those he loves. So he's not going to allow you to remain in that state of pride, in that state of haughtiness. He's going to bring some sort of crushing to humble you. He's going to bring some sort of event to bring you back down. Of course, you immediately think of like Nebuchadnezzar, who was proud in his heart and looked at his kingdom and said, "Look what I've made, look what I've done." And the Lord humbled him and dropped him to his knees and made him lose his mind, so that he went around like a wild beast for 7 years. And so that's always scary to me, because I know my own heart, and I know how much I deal with pride. And I've often always thought, like, and my pride often is on an intellectual level, not necessarily a physical level, like, or a financial level. Pride comes in all sorts of various forms. It's often like a root of a lot of our sins. But I often pride myself in my intellect. I always think like, tragically and sadly, I always think like I'm smarter, or I know more, or I'm able to argue better or reason better. And so being aware of that causes a fear, because I'm like, what's the Lord going to have to do to humble me? Like, is he going to have to make me lose my mind like Nebuchadnezzar? And that's a scary thought for me. So like, it's just this continual everyday thing to check that pride, to try to be humble, because destruction follows pride, haughtiness, and honor comes before humility, and humility comes before honor. So when you're humble, of course, that makes you think of like that proverb, or not proverb, but parable that the Lord told about the man who went to the wedding feast and sat in the back. And then the prince came up and said, "Hey, what are you doing way back here? Come up to the front." He humbled himself by saying, "I'm not worthy of the better seats. I'm just going to sit back here and give preference to others. I'm going to honor others better than myself." And then he got honor because of that. Where like in front of everybody, the prince comes up to him and says, "Hey, come up further. You deserve a better seat." So there's a dichotomy there, because like if you seek humility for those purposes, it defeats the purpose of humility. If you humble yourself in order to gain favor, then that's really a form of pride, and it erases. So like true humility has an almost like an unaware thought of the honor that's going to come. Like, you don't care about the honor. True humility gives no thought to the honor. It doesn't even occur to them that honor is going to come. True humility just says, I'm lowly. I know my own heart, my own sin, and I want what's better for others. I'm going to prefer others. I want them to be comfortable, to be prosperous, to be happy, whatever. So you seek theirs. And a cool thing about like small groups, like if you're involved in a tight knit group of fellowship, is that you learn lessons like this. When you have an intimate fellowship, the Lord has blessed me and put me into a group where we're really, really tight knit. Like I see ourselves as like an Acts type church, where we dwell together. We're with each other all the time. We're completely transparent with each other, and so through that, there's so much conflict. There's so much personalities and just and egos and prides. There's so much conflict, but because of those things, we learn these biblical principles. We learn, and like one thing the Lord has me learning right now is the humility aspect. Trying to humble myself and put myself lower than others, and it's super hard to do. It takes grace, and it takes a lot of destruction. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of injury and forgiveness and offense, and praise God that He works through all that stuff. But you learn to humble yourself to others and to prefer others before self. Verse 13, I think, right? We just read 12, yeah. 13, he that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him. So this is another interesting thing that's easily observable in your own life and in society. When people are having dialogue, when they're talking, there's often a natural type, flesh type response to speak before you hear the whole thing, to give your opinion before you know all the facts. We do that so often. You've developed an opinion and an idea, and somebody starts to bring that up, and you just blurt out your opinion and idea without hearing the whole story. Like it's very unfortunate because right here it says it's folly and shame. Like you might have to be corrected, like, hey, that's not even the point I was trying to make. Hold on, hear me out. So wisdom learns from this. Wisdom foresees this, and wisdom stops its mouth and listens to the whole story. And like one of the important things is not only listening to the whole story, but defining terms. I heard it recently that some old philosopher, I can't remember if it was one of the Greek philosophers like Plato or Aristotle or something like that, said that defining terms is the main principle of wisdom. And there's so much truth in that, because often misunderstandings come just because somebody's using a phrase or a term in a different way than what you would understand it to be. Like clarity is important when somebody's speaking. Hey, what do you mean when you say this? And then let them clarify their terms, because often they're thinking of something completely different than what you are, and that can clear up an issue immediately. So you not only want to listen intently to get the whole story, but to carefully define terms, find out exactly what they mean by what they're saying, and then you can speak into it. But we have a tendency to just start speaking before you even get into any sort of depth. Often, like let's say you're talking politics, and somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, Joe Biden is our new president-elect." And before they can even finish speaking, you're like, hold on, the counts ain't even done. There's recounts going on. The electoral hasn't been certified, so on and so forth. And like, so you assume their end point. You assume where they're going with their thought. And so you start speaking into it before they even end. And they might not even have gone there. Their whole point might have been your point. They might have started that conversation that way, and then we're going to say, yeah, and so now we're waiting for the official recounts and the certification. But because you jumped the gun without hearing them out, that can often lead to conflict, because then pride comes into it. They feel offended that you jumped the gun. You're on the defense already because you assume the point they're trying to make, and so you've already gone on the offense, And so it can ruin everything. And that's the whole point of what's being said here, is it's folly and shame to speak before you hear a matter. Like, you want to sit and hear it out and define terms and really understand the point the person's trying to make. Often, like that's how I'll conversate with somebody. They'll make their whole point, and then, like, I'm still not clearly understanding what they're trying to get at. And so you'll ask them to clarify, like, what's the heart of what you're trying to get at here? What's the point you're trying to make? And once you can understand that, then there can be a free dialogue. But it's so important to really understand what a person's trying to say before you start speaking into it. Verse 14, the spirit of a man will sustain his infirmity, but a wounded spirit who can bear? So that's talking infirmity, an injury or some sort of handicap or something like that. As long as you're in good spirits, like a cheerful heart is medicine to the soul. As long as you're in good spirits and a fighting spirit, you can overcome that painful thing. You can remain joyful. You can remain energetic. You can remain determined to overcome this disease, overcome this illness, overcome this infirmity. So that the spirit of a man will maintain, like keeping a cheerful countenance, keeping hope. You think about, like, people with cancer. They go through so many treatments and hear so many negative prognoses that eventually it wears them down and they stop fighting. They give up hope. And I feel like that really probably has a lot to do with death coming then. Whereas if not to say, like, the Lord determines times and appoints seasons, so you have an appointment with death, and the Lord is sovereign over that, and so just having a positive mind is not going to overcome that. But having a cheerful heart and having determination can overcome a lot of infirmity. Whereas the counterpart to that, it says a wounded spirit who can bear? When your spirit is wounded, when your thought life, when you're defeated, when you're despondent, when you're depressed, then every little thing feels like an insurmountable weight. How can you overcome it then? It just pushes you down and lowers you. So that wounded spirit. So, like, the first remedy to any sort of thing is the inner man. Rejoice in your inner man, and then your spirit will be strengthened, and then you can deal with all sorts of externals. That's why Isaiah says to put on the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. When you're heavy, when you're despondent, when your spirit's down, praise, be thankful, sing worship, lift up your heart in praise to the Lord, and that's going to strengthen you. That's going to encourage you, regardless of external circumstances. It's going to strengthen that inner man and help you to overcome. Oh, sorry about that. So anyways, that was verse 14. I think we'll stop there. Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 15 next time. All right, I love you guys. Talk to you later. Hey, everyone. We're continuing on in Proverbs Chapter 18. We read through verse 14, so we're going to pick up here in verse 15. It says, the heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge. I suppose that's a common thing with the born again. I can only speak for my own life, but I would assume that all the other born again saints out there experience the same thing, that once you're born again, knowledge, understanding of God and his glory, which is seen through Jesus Christ, in Jesus Christ, through Jesus Christ, and is revealed through his word. It's those are the dominant themes of your heart and your mind. Like, that's what you seek after. Like, whatever your previous life was, whatever your focus was, like my focus would have been on drugs and sex, but mostly just drugs, dominated by the drug atmosphere, and that's where my mindset was. After getting saved, my mindset is now on knowing God, knowing what he desires of me, and his character, and just who he is, and his magnificence and his beauty. So the heart gets knowledge, the mind seeks knowledge, and that's what the born again do. Whatever that previous path you were on has changed. That's what repentance is. You no longer desire those other things, those other lifestyles. Your whole focus now is on truth, is on knowing Jesus Christ, who is God in the flesh. And so the prudent or the wise, which are characteristics that are associated with the born again. So like all throughout the Proverbs, when it says righteous or prudent or wise or whatever the case, if it uses some sort of good adjective to describe a person, it's referring to the born again. Because apart from God, no one is good. We can't accomplish goodness without the power of Christ in us, creating that in us and through us. So any righteousness, any wisdom, any goodness, any prudence is going to be spirit produced. It's going to be Christ produced, and that only occurs in those who are spirit born, those who are born again. So all these phrases about goodness and wisdom and prudence refer to the born again. And then they're held up in opposition to the wicked, the lost, all those that are separated from Christ, which we once were. All of humanity exists in that lost state because of Adam. We're all doomed and damned and condemned, and there's no goodness in our hearts. Even the good we do is tainted with wickedness, selfishness and impurities. That's that lost world, incapable of doing good, incapable of seeking God. And so when the scriptures in the Proverbs refer to the wicked, it's referring to that mass of humanity of which we once were, the lost. And then only by the grace of God, only by Him plucking us out of that and putting His Spirit within us and causing us to be born again, do we have any semblance of righteousness or prudence or wisdom. And that's because it's His Spirit in us. It's the evidence of His Spirit in us. And so that's what the scriptures are outlining all throughout the Proverbs, is the dichotomy between the two worlds, the two kingdoms, the lost world and the kingdom of God. And the lost world is all of humanity, and the kingdom of God is spirit-produced righteousness. So that's not really what verse 15 is talking about there, but I wanted to outline that, because when it says, because you'll often hear me when I read the heart of the prudent, I'm immediately thinking the born again. The born again are the only ones who have prudence, spirit-wrought prudence. And when it says the ear of the wise, I'm thinking the born again, because only the born again have the kind of wisdom that scriptures is referring to. Verse 16, a man's gift maketh room for him, and bringeth him before great men. He that is first... Oh, sorry about that. That was loud. He that is first in his own cause seemeth just, but his neighbor cometh and searcheth him. I think that's just saying that we always justify our actions. We always think that we are in the right. And so we need outside observation to come and search the matter to determine who really is right. We're always going to defend self. For the most part, we're always going to assume that our opinion is the right one, that our thought process is the right one. And so a neighbor comes and searches us out, somebody from the outside who can observe the situation with an unbiased perspective. The lot causeth contentions to cease, and parteth between the mighty. Yeah, and I've mentioned before how that's such an odd thing, but it's a truth. It's we can experience the truth of this verse in the world that we live, because casting a lot, which is like rolling of the dice, or in the case of me and my brothers, we'll often play rock, paper, scissors to determine an issue, and it always causes the issue to be settled. The winner, the lot, determines the winner. And that's what this verse is saying. The lot causes contentions to cease. It puts an end to the matter. It's weird how we all submit to the lot. We all submit to the outcome of the casting of the dice, or the rock, paper, scissors, or whatever it is. And we have that other verse, I think, in the previous chapter, or in chapter 16, one of the two, 16, 16:33, that the lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing is of the Lord. The Lord determines the outcome. And so in my group of fellowship, we read that verse and we know, okay, the Lord is sovereign. He's going to determine the outcome. And so when we cast our lot, we play rock, paper, scissors to settle an issue between us, we know that the outcome is determined by the Lord. And so he has settled the issue. And that's why it causes contention to cease. You submit to that authority. Verse 19, a brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and their contentions are like the bars of a castle. Yeah, and that's another thing that we experience in the world. We get this wisdom experientially, that when we offend somebody, when somebody has been wronged by us, it's so hard to regain the friendship. And that the Lord said, blessed are the peacemakers. And so often it takes you humbling yourself. You must, even if you're the person who's wronged, like if you're wrong, if I'm wronged by you, it's going to take a lot to be won back. This is what they're saying. It's harder than winning a strong city. It's like coming up against a walled city. But if I humble myself, I lower those bars. If I humble myself and allow myself to be wronged, which is what which is what a lot of what Jesus taught in the New Testament about forgiveness and turning the other cheek and being humble, submitting to one another, preferring one another. It's a driving characteristic of the Christian nature, to be submissive to each other, to humble ourselves, to not take offense. And so that's where, if I'm offended and you're trying to fix it, that's going to be hard. But if I'm offended and I drop my guard, I drop the offense, I lower the castle walls, so to speak, then there's peace. And that's what the Lord requires of us. He requires us to seek peace, to make peace. So anyway, that was verse 19. I think I'll stop there. Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 20 next time. All right, I love you guys. We'll talk to you later. Hey everybody. We're continuing on in Proverbs 18. We read through verse 19 last time, so we're going to pick up here in verse 20. A man's belly shall be satisfied with the fruit of his mouth, and with the increase of his lips shall he be filled. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. So I think it's important to clarify, because that's a verse I feel like is often taken out of context and twisted, especially by the charismatic movement. There's what's popularly referred to in Christian circles as the name it and claim it type belief. And that's really a New Age pagan idea, that you can speak things into existence, that if you believe it enough, you'll get it. Like, I've heard people say that the New Age would teach that you put a picture of what you want on the wall, and you just imagine yourself getting it. And it's that same idea, it's that same philosophy that the charismatics teach with that name it and claim it, that if you speak things, you can speak things into existence. So the power of positivity. It's like that the televangelist, the Joel Osteen type stuff, that just believe that you're an eagle, and you will be an eagle. Just believe that you're going to get that new job, and proclaim it over your life. And you'll often hear, even sometimes shockingly, even solid Christians will say, don't speak that over my family, or don't speak that over me, or don't speak that over my husband. And it's like, that's not a reality. It's a blasphemous idea, from what I understand, is that because it's this teaching in the Oral Roberts, Kenneth Copeland type ministry, that's not a ministry, that's devilish. But it's this idea that we are little gods. We're created in the image of God. So we in fact are little gods, and they'll take things out of context to show that. And since God has the power to speak things into existence, in the beginning God said, "Let there be light." Jesus said, Lazarus, come forth. He spoke things. Since we have that God seed in us, so to speak, since we are little gods, we also have the same powers. They say the same things that God did, we can do. And so they'll take this verse and use that to kind of back up their heresy, saying death and life are in the power of the tongue. They'll say you have the power to speak death over people. You have the power to speak life over situations. And it's blasphemous nonsense. Only we are not little gods, in a sense that we have dominion. Like Psalms says that ye are gods, little g. So in the sense that we have dominion over the earth, and we have moral capability and stuff like that. But there's only one creative, universal, all-powerful God. There's only one who can speak and make things happen. We don't have that power. It's blasphemous to try to say that we have that power, and that's not what this verse is teaching. What this verse is teaching is using symbolic language, kind of, so to speak. Like, you have the power to destroy, like, psychologically, emotionally, people's psyche and their emotional state by speaking death, by speaking evil to them, by being critical, by being harsh, by putting down. You have the ability to destroy a person's psyche. If a child is brought up under that, where the father's constantly critical, they're going to grow up with shattered self-esteem, with no self-confidence, with little self-worth. That's what that's saying. We have the power to speak that into, like, what you say to a person affects them. It affects their emotion. It affects their psyche. It's not saying you actually have the ability, like when somebody's going in to get tested for cancer, and you're like, and you know the symptoms, and you go, yeah, they've probably got cancer, and people are like, oh, don't speak that, now it's going to come true. Like, come on, that's superstitious nonsense. You don't have the power to speak things into existence. Whether or not they get cancer is a sovereign act of God. And so it's foolish to believe that that's what this is referring to. It's simply saying, when you speak to a person, if you speak kind, edifying, building up words, you can encourage an individual. You can give them confidence. You can give them a joyous self-worth and happiness. But if you speak critically and harsh and down-putting to a person, you can destroy them. So that's what that's referring to. The fact that we have the power to speak things into existence is nonsense. Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and obtaineth favor of the Lord. To be completely transparent, that verse has often been quite cutting to me because I'm single. Now I'm 38. I always got to look at the calendar and do the math. I'm 38 and I'm single, so it's like, all right, Lord. It says here that if you find a wife, you obtain favor of the Lord. Why don't I have your favor, Lord? And of course, that's foolish. The Lord favors us in a multitude of ways. This is just one of the ways that He favors. But it's whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing. And Paul emphasized that too. Like he said, I wish all could be single like I'm single, but it's a good thing to get married. It's not good for a man to be alone. So to find a wife is a good, positive, beneficial thing, as long as she's a godly wife. The scriptures remind us repeatedly to avoid a contentious woman, that ungodly type behavior. But it's a favor. You obtain favor of the Lord. And so the fact that it's a favorable gift from God, there's another verse that says a prudent wife is a gift from God, shows that I think we have the idea of marriage and courting and dating like backwards. We think that it's up to us to seek a wife, to like hunt for a wife, and people will date to test each other to see whether or not they're going to get married. And that's not the way it's supposed to be done. A wife is a favorable gift from God. It's something that God gives to you. God gives you a spouse. The people that I know in my personal life that have found good godly wives, it just happened kind of miraculously. Like all of a sudden, this woman shows up to Bible study, or this woman shows up to church, or whatever, and then they find out that they're attracted to each other, and then a courtship happens, which in a Christian world shouldn't be dating. It should be like almost like an interview process for marriage, running through the checklist of all these things and making sure that you're on the same page before you enter into that contract of marriage. There shouldn't be any romance involved, because if you find out you're not compatible, you've then committed romantic acts with somebody that's not your spouse. And to me, that's a type of adultery. But anyways, I'm going way off track here. The point is that a wife is a good thing, a spouse is a good thing, and that the Lord favors you by providing one for you. The poor useth entreaties, but the rich answereth roughly. A man that hath friends must shew himself friendly, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. So, what does it mean to be friendly? Like, if you have friends, you have to be friendly. And so, I don't know how we would define friendlies. I should probably look up that word in the Strong's Concordance and find out what the word friendly is defined as biblically. But I know that friendship can be difficult. Close, intimate relationships cause conflict and offense and hardship. And so it takes action to maintain friends. It takes action to maintain fellowship. You have to put forth the effort. Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. Peacemakers. You have to make peace. You have to be willing to humble yourself. You have to submit and prefer one another. So you have, and so I would say that's what being friendly is preferring. Jesus said, no greater love is there than to lay down your life for one another. So to sacrifice your own desires for the needs of others, that to me is friendship. And so, like, friendship is like I say, it's a work. It's things that you have to put effort into constantly. If you don't, the friendships will fall apart. If you don't work at it, if you don't strive to make peace, to forgive, if you don't strive to be humble and submissive to one another, and that takes self-sacrifice, because a lot of times you'll be looking at a situation going, well, I was wronged. They need to be the peacemaker. They need to be the one to ask for forgiveness. They need to be the one to seek the solution. But that's not what the scriptures teach us. The scriptures take no. Regardless of what's going on, you make peace. Make peace. Submit to one another. Be friendly. And that's how you maintain friendships. That's how you maintain fellowship. It's really the most beautiful lesson probably that I've learned in my own small group, is that with all the personality conflicts and all the quirks and all the aggravations and all the pride and the conflict and the egos and the offense, it takes self-sacrificing humility to keep it going, to keep that friendship going. It takes a willingness to say, it doesn't matter who was wronged here. I want the friendship to continue. I value the friendship. And so I'm going to make it work. And so I think that's what being friendly is about. Anyways, that wraps up chapter 18. That was verse 24 there. So Lord willing, we will start chapter 19 next time. All right. I love you guys. We'll talk to you later.